Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and welcome. Welcome to the Infinite Way, where spirituality meets humanity. And it brings me great pleasure to introduce our guest today, Susan Griffith-Jones. Born British, Susan Griffith-Jones is a creative, innovative artist who has dedicated her life to traveling the ancient inner paths of the yogis, investigating the nature of existence from many angles, and communicating the like. Organizing the findings of her explorations into innovative, symbolic representations, into artistic documentaries whose timelines are built upon the sacred pattern embedded into them. They are also displayed within her large photo collage art and art installation pieces. Susan explains their meaning in her books and articles, as well as talking about them publicly at conferences, workshops, and the like. Susan is currently combining all 9 photo collage art pieces and installations that she made during the last 18 years as the individual parts of the larger machine that she's named the Magician's Jewel, whose shape and appearance represent universal truth in a symbol, as well as a working device to generate energy that is designed to revitalize massive areas of land and people. However, after introducing Susan Griffith-Jones, I realized that in speaking with her, I'd like to read a poem that she wrote that truly represents, I believe, how she feels and reflects where she's at this moment. So the poem goes like this. Like walking through a passageway, they grabbed you from all sides. They slot you in to become a worker of the system. I walk on to create my own destiny. Give up my life, its purpose, my duty. Diving off a cliff, learning to fly before hitting the bottom. I walk on to create my own destiny. Calling the guru from afar, reeling me in and stunning me with methods. Learning the consciousness, I walk on to create my own destiny. Stabilizing spontaneity, allowing what happens to happen. Being at peace with the process, I walk on to create my own destiny. Taking hold of conscious tools, directly communing with source, sculpting reality, I walk on to create my own destiny. Welcome, Susan Griffith-Jones.
Thank you, Enolia, for reading that poem. Actually, when I hear that, it stirs me. I mean, I wrote it in a very spontaneous way, which, pouring out just small tidbits from my heart. The bio that I have to write for these kind of events or conferences or whatever else I'm doing too, I always feel are a little bit contrived. I mean, they're accurate in the sense, as far as my relative manifestation is concerned. I mean, what you spoke about just now, my writing, my artwork, my photography, my films, the symbolic representations that I am attempting to infuse into these works is really the relative manifesting aspect of my work. But the poem contains something more, and perhaps it's a little more in line with the topic that we decided to talk about here, which is leaping orbits. And each of those little verses is actually an orbit.
Thank you so much for, yeah.
Well, it's an orbit that has been already traversed and not because I knew that was a process I was going to go through, actually. And we're talking about a process of, well, a conscious process, let's say, of 30 plus years now.
Yes, yes. So I would love for our audience to understand where we're coming from when we state leaving orbits. So I want you to define that base orbit, that starting, the starting point of where you perceive yourself and how you chose to decide, or how leaping came into effect. And I know that you understand what I'm saying, but we'll bring the audience in.
It's $1 million question, actually, and it's one that could have me, have me talking to you for hours and hours, but I'll try and keep it succinct here. You know, when we're growing up, we're very much in the care of our parents, or hopefully we are in the care of our parents. Most of us are. And under their guidance, and where we should be going and what we should be doing, which school we attend, what kind of things are in our interest range. We ape our parents. I mean, we copy them, we mimic them, we like that because they like it. We're shown a certain path in life, and you know, we're geared towards a certain focus. Of course, we have our individuality too, and that comes into the fore, let's say, you know, after we go to secondary school, we're starting to think about our own personal interests and what we would like to do with our lives. But that's kind of on a bedrock and a foundation of what our parents have given us or offered us, or what we know about reality because of the situation we've grown up in. So in my own case, I did everything I should do. I was a good child at school. I studied hard. My academic standard was good, was high actually. And I took part in sports and acting and theatre and all these things that, you know, school offers you. And when it came to leaving school, I had a place at, in fact, I had been offered a place at Cambridge University to study classics, Latin and Greek, which was a subject that I'd followed throughout school. And two things happened in the summer after I left school. Because I was just a very kind of going with the flow person, and I was just continuing on to university like everybody else was. And then suddenly, when my results came through from my A-levels, as we have in the UK, it's our high school graduation school certificate, I dropped a grade in my Latin. And when I spoke to Cambridge University, they said to me, it's no problem, we'll keep your place open, but you've got to hit the grade. Sorry. That means redo the exam next summer. So that was an event that stopped me in my tracks. I didn't think that that was going to happen. So I was like la-di-da-di-da going along doing whatever. Suddenly, boom, shock, a little bit of shock, but a shock that kind of really wakes you up. And then a few days later, I hadn't really made a decision yet. I'd already spoken to the university. They said, yeah, you can retake your exam. So I assumed that I would just retake the exam. But then as I was driving along, I remember exactly the place it was in the Oxfordshire countryside. I can even remember the bend in the road that I came round. And just in that moment came this euphoric realization and understanding and feeling, and I don't know how to explain what it was, that I didn't have to do this. I was like, I don't have to do this? But what else would I do is the immediate question that comes up in my mind. And then something that I probably now, as a 50-year-old, I'm explaining, but my 18-year-old self didn't necessarily get it in that moment, or couldn't define it in that moment, was that I needed to find the truth. in inverted
Mhm.
commas. Whatever that truth was, I had no idea where it was, who could explain it to me, how it was, and what it was. But in that moment, I knew that neither Cambridge University nor any other university in the UK or wherever could teach me what this truth was. And I made a decision there and then that I didn't tell anybody for a couple of weeks, of course, because I was going to be in big trouble at this point. So I got my £250 out of my post office account that I'd been saving up from birthdays and Christmases. I bought myself a good pair of hiking boots and a rucksack. I cancelled my place at, I mean, it wasn't just Cambridge. Cambridge had offered me, but I had places at other universities as well, in case Cambridge didn't work out. Other good universities in the UK that I wrote to all of them. I cancelled everything. And I bought myself a bus ticket from London, London Victoria Station to the port of Calais in France, just across the English Channel. Did I know where I was going? Nope. The only thing I knew, that when I asked myself that question, where do I go to find this truth? It said, or it, I'm calling it, myself, I suppose, in my higher sense
Arts
of being,
calling. Mhm.
whatever you want to call it, it doesn't matter,
Yes.
said that just go, look left, look right each day of your life, follow the road, and you will find it. That's all I knew. So when I look at it now, when I look back at it now, having been through 32 years of experience and traveling and all the rest of it, there was a leap in orbit in that moment, because the karma, let's call it karma, to just go through my life and do, I'm not saying it's wrong to go on to university, not at all, not at all. It was just my karmic imprint. The other thing, I just forget one crucial point and one crucial bit of information that I received in that moment. And that was, this is your last chance to get out. If you don't get out now, you never will.
And that
So I
is
think
so profound.
that was a big push. That in
Yes.
itself was a big push. But honestly speaking, whatever was going on in my heart, you know, I'm touching my heart here because it really did come from my heart, was stronger than the force of the karma or the force of the path to take me on further on the route that had been prepared for me. You know, I'd been grooved in this channel to do this, to do that, to go and
Yes.
study classics, to go on to become a lawyer, or to walk the high courts of London as a barrister, or
Yes.
whatever, however it could have panned out in that parallel universe. But this was a leap. This was a leap in orbit, because it took me off a path that I was very much and very much committed to as well. It
Yes.
took me onto that, and it took me onto a completely, I mean, it took me into a zone where actually I had no idea where I was anymore. I mean, I
Yeah. And
jumped
I'm
out
going
of.
to hold you right there. I'm going to hold you right there because I really want the audience to understand, because we all have these moments, but most of us ignore them. Most
Mhm.
of us go through life going, there's no way that I want to face the discourse of the relationships that I have with the decision that I've made if I choose to make that decision. Most of us will go, but I can't answer all of the questions that I'm going to be asked. How am I going to make money? How am I going to live? What am I going to do with my future? Where are you going to go? How can you go without a plan? Oh, you're a woman. You can't go by yourself. I can list the litany of things. And then those of us who elect to go and ignore what I would call that moment for you, my heart's calling, internal source coming to me. I feel it through and through within my whole body. I know that I'm supposed to do this. And then there's the human reality that I'm facing all around me, and I ignore it. And then what happens is that you either ignore it your whole life, or like some of us, like myself, it comes very much later in life to dare to step into that channel of reality of honoring the calling. For me, it came later because I was faced with all of those litany of things. And I really want people to tune in to understanding that we all have this,
Yes, I
but
do
most of
believe
us
it.
don't. Mm,
I do believe these kind of events do happen to all of us. And in fact, I mean, the backlash that I got after that, so I organized everything first, and then I told them. It
yeah,
sounds like the opposition. They were not my opposition. Actually, being a parent now and understanding how you're looking at your 18-year-old, 20-year-old, 25-year-old, then of course it's only with the best kind of wish that they're going to use their potential and get the most out of life. And in their relative understanding, what I was doing was absolute madness, because it was
that's right.
something.
Because we're supposed to have all of the answers. We're supposed to have the answers to our life, the entrance points to our life's choices at that age. No, 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 no. You're groomed to stay the course and make the decision and show that you can financially support yourself and show this and show that. Yes.
Within these parameters, you're allowed to
Yes.
go that side or this side, but not, hell forbid, or heaven forbid, go completely like open space. I mean, what I
Yeah.
did was I pierced the bubble, because I'd grown up in a bubble. I mean, we all grow up in our own
We
bubble,
all grow up in a bubble. Yes.
whichever
Yes.
social bubble or cultural bubble or whatever. We grow up in the bubble and we stay in that bubble and we float around in that bubble, allowing certain bubbles to come. And then, when you burst the bubble and you say, I am going to do something that is like completely outside of anything that any of us in this bubble know about, it's very, very, I think it's harder for the others who were assuming that this parental role on you, because they feel like they've completely failed in their role. It's like, she's gone off the tracks.
Right. Right.
She's gone
Right.
mad. She's gone crazy. She's gone, she's lost it. She's
Yes.
whatever. Whereas
Yes.
I remember that moment of elation when I told them all. There was a family dinner. All of them, it was like a perfect occasion. All of them were gathered, the main ones anyway, were all gathered around that table. And I made this announcement in the middle of the dinner. And my heart was singing, was laughing, the joy that was in me, the bursting, the bliss, the feeling of just like, I've done it. I've done it. And then, of course, 2 minutes of silence, and there everybody, and they took me outside one by one, and they talked to me one by one. What are you doing? And what do you think you're doing? We're not going to fund this nonsense, blah, 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 all the rest of it. Where are you going? I was like, I don't know, like elated. What are you going to do? I don't know. Like, again, these were superfluous questions. I was just going to go and do it. Whatever it was, I'd go and do it.
Exactly.
And this was amazing. Actually, I have to say, though, when I landed at Calais in France, it was, I think for the first few days, it was, I had very limited funds. By this point, I probably had £200 left of my 250 after buying the, or probably less than that, 180. And, so I had to stay in the cheapest places I could find and da, 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 da. Anyway, those are all details of how the story panned out from that moment on. But really, that was the moment, I would say, that I took my first leap. It was conscious. I didn't call it a leaping orbit at that time, but it was a time that I left that behind and I moved into another space. But then again, I want to clarify leaving that behind, because actually I was not running away from anything. I was moving towards.
I dare say that was the first marked time that you acted on what spirit called in your heart.
Yeah.
And so so this is beautiful because this truly characterizes leaping orbits.
Mm.
When that unidentifiable call in your heart fills your being so strongly that you know that you have to act on it. And acting on it may be bringing you down the birth canal, like you're being reborn, because you're cutting all ties to that which you know to be quote unquote safe, or that's what you know to be acceptable by everybody's standards and judgments. But you know it, you're compelled to do it, and you can't explain to anybody else why, and nor do you feel the need to. You just have to do it. And
It's so
so,
strong. Yes, it's so strong. This is what I meant by this. It's stronger. That call from spirit is stronger than that karmic force that is pushing you on in another groove. It's strong enough to.
I really want to hone into you, because people don't know how beautiful you are. Such a beautiful spirit you are, and I want to hone in on it. That connection to source, that allowing for source to speak and lead you, take us in the next leap of orbit that allowed the unfolding of where source directed you, and how that became the guiding light in your life.
Truly and honestly, I think there were a number of them that I also didn't act on in between.
Okay.
Because aged, I think in fact it was on this same journey, I said to myself, I will travel until I run out of money, then I need to work. Yeah. Wherever I end up, I'll work. So unconsciously or subconsciously or even consciously, I made a beeline towards Italy. And I remember a very important conversation that I had on the train with a British lady, in fact, going through the mountains from Switzerland and into northern Italy. Interestingly, the weather on one side was snowing, cold, and blizzard, like blizzards of snow. And on the other side, when we came out of the tunnel, it was about a 10-minute tunnel, it was beautiful blue sky and sunny and everything else. It's interesting that weather shift, having gone through this tunnel. Again, there's a tunnel. This is a conversation I'm having in a tunnel between Switzerland and Italy. And this 26 year, I was 18 and she was 26 years old. She's British. And she told me that she had just come back from Nepal. And she had been trekking out in the mountains in Nepal. And she said, you would love it there. And I was like, wow, I want to go to Nepal more than anything else. I'll stay a bit in Italy. I'll earn a bit of money. I'll get enough for the ticket and I'll go to Nepal. Totally like set on it. Like, I'm going to do this. But then, of course, Italy got in the way. And living in Italy was lovely. I mean, I did menial jobs. I was washing dishes. I was looking after kids. I'm not saying they're menial jobs any worse or better. They earned me my money. And they were in themselves a learning curve that I needed to go through at that time. And in fact, one of the best job situations I think I've ever been in any part of my life was this one restaurant that I worked in that was run by a family. And before we started our shift, everybody would sit down at a big long table, from the grandmother to the youngest ones. And we'd have a 3-course meal, typical Italian style. All of us, maybe 20 of us, were sitting at this long table, just all eating together. Then we go out into our shift, we do the work. Then there was this kind of beautiful connection between anyway, I'm going off track here. I just wanted to say the sort of jobs I ended up in, I actually really enjoyed them. I loved them. So just hold the you should go to Nepal, you would love it. She gave me, in the form of this 26-year-old British woman, gave me an instruction that I knew in that moment was, yes, I want it. I'm going to do that. But then I got lost in the other things going on, and it was lovely. It was fun. Life went on, and eventually I forgot about this Nepalese thing,
Yes, yes.
you know?
And I can see how you could do that in Italy, as beautiful as it
Yeah,
is.
of course. I
I
mean, of
love
course.
Italy. It's
Of
gorgeous.
course. I mean, Italy is so charming, and I loved it. And I went to all the museums, and I studied the art, and
The best
this,
food.
this is where, in fact, for my relative, relative panning out of my life, this was a very, very important point, because I learned about symbol. I went to all the churches and the art galleries, and I studied the Renaissance masters. And of course, a lot of the art is infused with symbol and
Yes.
perspective. I couldn't tell you as much at the time, but I actually later on, I realized that my understanding of symbol came deeply from this this early study that I did in Italy over a couple of years. Anyway, so shifting on, a lot of things happened. I mean, not to go into detail, we just don't have time. But eventually, I ended up in Russia, in Moscow.
Wow. Wow. How did that happen?
It's a very long story from events happening. Eventually, I
Right.
ended
Russia.
in Moscow.
Okay.
And it was 1993. It was Perestroika.
Okay.
And in fact, one of the reasons I'd gone to Russia was like, wow, this looks exciting. I want to see what's going on there.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, so I ended up meeting who was to become the father of my two children, not in Russia itself, but through a connection who lived in Moscow, somebody who I was at that point asking, like, okay, because it was perestroika and because I was from Western Europe, people had been asking me, please send us jeans, clothes, pens, peas in tins, tomatoes in tins, anything produce from Western Europe. And I wasn't into trading or anything, but because so many people were asking me these things, I said, what the hell, I'll set up a trading company. So I'd gone back to England. I'd been to some kind of trade shows and stuff, and I got some connections. I'd gone back to Moscow, and now I was selling little packaging machines in Moscow.
Wow.
Yeah, because they needed to like package their bread and their meat and their other things that had previously only been sold in markets, that they were now opening up kind of grocery stores and things like that, convenience stores. This was a new concept in the post-perestroika world in Moscow. Now, of course, it's very different there. It just looks like a Western city, but before it wasn't at all. And so I'd got into selling these packaging machines in Moscow. And during my, talks with various food companies, one lady had asked me if I knew of anybody who could send a couple of trucks of oranges. So through a contact in Moscow, I met Burinder, who we connected, and he sent me these 2 trucks of oranges from Israel. The deal went through, and then when I went back to London that summer, I would have to pick up my commission check from him in London. Anyway, so story went on. We eventually got together. He came back to Russia with me, and we were trading all over the world for the next couple of years. Now, this was my, my flirtation with money, let's call it.
Okay.
This whole story was my flirtation with money. I mean, we were signing $1 million deals in Russia. I was 21 years old, signing $1 million deals. We were traveling from west to east to north to south. We were living the life, so to speak. Then I got pregnant. Then I decided everything changed with my pregnancy. I suddenly decided, in fact, not suddenly, I was no longer interested in this business story anymore. Just dropped away like off me like a, before I was kind of like quite the aggressive little, dealer wheeler.
Yes, yes.
This has just dropped away. I was just no longer interested. I'm just no longer interested. Anyway, we had been a team, and a team needs to work together, right? And one member of the team drops off, then what do? It's no longer a team. So things
Right.
started to go downhill. It wasn't the kids' fault, I'm not saying that, because after 1 year, another one came. So I had to.
Yes.
So by this point, we've set up a little business in the UK that is bringing in, now the other way around, exporting items from Russia, like these little wooden cabins from northern Russia, beautiful little wooden cabins, into the UK. I mean, now these things are selling like hotcakes. I mean, we were 20 years too early, 30 years too early. These things are now selling like this, but this was a concept which was too new for the UK at the time. Anyway, so the whole thing just went from worst, bad to worse to worse to worse. And of course, when there's money problems, there's also causes relationship problems and everything else. Everything just went like a bomb through into this, blew up this situation. Anyhow, we tried to patch it up, so the business just, was gone. And we tried to patch things up over the next year or two or whatever, but something else happened at that point. Because when the business went down, I realized that now I'm 25. So we've jumped from 18 to 25 with a few examples in between. I realized that I mean, it's not quite exactly what I'd done, but a quote we all know, sold my soul to the devil. That this money thing, focusing on money, was not the way. I had gone through the highs and the lows of it. I've seen the whole thing panoramically. And I made a pact to myself that day when I locked the door of the office. I said, I will never, ever, ever, ever do anything for money again. Ever in my life. Now I will only do what I'm meant to be doing with my life. And then the question comes up, what's that? And immediately the response is, you must write. So I started writing. This is during the patch up, trying to patch up period.
Right.
I started writing, and to start with, I didn't really know what I was going to write, and actually it didn't really matter. I just put pen to paper, and whatever came down, came down. But after about 10 or 15 pages of trying to write some kind of story, which was not very good, suddenly other stuff started coming, which I had absolutely no idea where it was coming from. I started to talk about the spiritual realms and about these other dimensions and about other stuff. I honestly thought I was going crazy because I had nothing in my life to tangibly hold this, or where this information could have come from.
Yeah, the basis by which you would understand how it could come through that humans label as, well, where did you study? Well, how do you know this? Well, blah, 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 blah. And versus the fact that it is coming through.
And even worse than that was that I had nobody to go to ask for help as to what is going on. What is this stuff? I was afraid to tell anybody because they'd be like, you've gone cuckoo. I even myself thought I'd gone cuckoo. Like, what is this stuff coming through? But anyway, it was just like I couldn't stop writing. I was compulsive. I had to keep writing, and I wrote like volumes of filled notebooks by hand of this stuff that was coming through. Anyway, so Burinder at this point, I mean, it actually made the schism worse because he had also, being Indian, being Punjabi Indian, he'd also been involved with some gurus who were not quite so honest, in a sense. They'd used him in a way that was not nice. So he was now advising me, stay away from this spiritual stuff. It's dangerous and it can lead you into trouble. But my heart was telling me otherwise. I have to keep on going. And I got to a point where I actually couldn't cope with it anymore because I was starting to experience things in my relative manifest world which were just a little frightening. It was like I just couldn't cope with it anymore. And I was like, I remember that day. Now, this is the important moment that I called out. I was lying on my back on the grass in the summertime, and I called out into the space. I said, Guru, Guru, teacher, teacher, where are you? I cannot go on like this anymore. For God's sake, please help me. Please, wherever you are, whoever you are, I don't know who you are. I don't know where you are. I have no idea, but please, please help me, help me, help me, help me. This was a calling that was coming again, deep, deep from within the heart. Like, I really need help now. Anyway, again, the process, relative manifestation, takes time to process. It's not, well, it can be, but it's, a bit of time. And it happened the night, actually, when I did finally leave Burinda, which again was not an easy, it wasn't a black and white thing. Like, the ending of a relationship is not, your hearts are bonded, but somehow your relative manifestation is not gliding along together anymore. And this has to be acknowledged, or it doesn't always get acknowledged. But so in the end, I said, I know I have to leave. The only way that this is now the leaping of the orbit, by the way. I have to leave this relationship in order for this next step of what I am wishing with my heart to happens.
Yeah.
So after I left him that night, I remember lying in bed that night at the a spare room of a family member, 2 kids, one on this side, one on this side. They were still very little, like 3 and 4 or something. And I'm looking up at the ceiling, and I'm going, where do I go? Where do I go? And what do I do? So in a sense, I am asking the questions, and I am asking for the help. I have no idea who I'm asking to or what I'm asking to, but the knowing is so strong that I do need to ask. So it's not like I've got some definitive picture of a god or a helper or a human or anybody in my mind. I'm just putting it out there.
And I'm going to pause you right there, because I just, it's so funny. I'm sitting here listening to your story, and I'm thinking about moments in my life. And I actually came to a precipice of that category also, where for me, it was like, I need to know my traditions. I need a teacher. I need an elder. I need somebody come into my life and work with me, and remembering that I had a moment like that where I was calling out, going, where's my teacher? Help me find my teacher. I need to find that person in my life, of which life unveils, and that leap forward comes. And I'm sharing this because I want our audience to understand the parallels that this happens in many people's lives. We don't talk about it. We don't talk about it. So please continue.
And well, it's a kind of, I was in a very kind of humbling position at that moment, because I was in a space where I didn't quite know what was going to happen next. I've left that behind, that I've invested a lot of time in and energy in, but I know that I've got to leave that behind. And now it's like crossing the English Channel again. I'm now in Calais. Like, where do I go? What do I do?
Yes.
And now the information comes. So that night I had a dream, and in the morning I'm still reciting on my lips, Annapurna, Annapurna, Annapurna. And I'm like, Annapurna, what the hell's that mean? And so I looked it up. I went to the library, in fact, to look it up, because in those days you didn't have computers hanging around the house that you could just, Google it. I went to the library and I looked it up, and Annapurna is in central Nepal. And then I'm like,
it clicks.
10 years have gone by now since the go to Nepal instruction came. And I'm like, oh, okay, this time I am going to Nepal. Nothing is going to stop me on earth. Anyway, so by hook or by crook, it's a beautiful story, but not to be told in this moment because it'll take up so much time. I ended up moving to Nepal by the end of that year and taking my 2 kids with me. And within the next few months, I'd met this very, very high master of the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, who himself is a, I don't know, master of masters, they call him, because he's one of the elders, yeah? Like you're talking about, he's one of the elders, actually, the tradition, old school, you know, one of the really very, very capable, anyway, I could go on praising him forever. Really very great, great master. And that was it. Everything changed from that moment on. There was, of course, the question of finances, because in order to, let's say, follow a spiritual path all the time, I'm not talking about just in the evenings or the weekends. Okay, you can have a normal job and follow a spiritual path, but what I'm talking about is actually physically going into the study of it, conducting long retreats where I'd be for 3 months, you know, in my room, blah blah blah. This needs space, time, all the rest of it. So so now let's look. That was another leap of orbit, was when I left behind the relationship that was holding me down. I mean, in the end, there was probably nothing wrong with the relationship. And I mean, there was something wrong with the relationship. Otherwise, I wouldn't have jumped out of it. But it wasn't so bad that I needed to, but I knew that I had to.
Right.
Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
So it wasn't like something so awful happened that I'd like, I gotta leave whatever happens. It's like, it was just like a knowing, I have to leave this relationship. And then boom, the next leap of the next orbit appeared. And now I was totally in this realm with the lamas, the teachings, the initiations. For 6 years, I stayed in this bubble, let's call it. And then, and during this time, I started in fact, it was my teacher who threw the first snowball and got me into, well, actually, I say that, it was my interpretation of his words to me when I went out on a trip into the mountains and he told me, take photographs. In fact, I'd already left the room and his assistant was calling me back. Hey, Susan, come back in. Rinpoche wants to tell you something else. And I just came back in the room and he was shouting out to me, take photographs. And ironically, a situation had just happened, and I just a few weeks ago been given an old camera, which was the light meter on it wasn't working, and so I took it to a camera mending, you know, technician in the city in Kathmandu, and he said, no, it's beyond repair. And I'm like, okay, well, the only other way to use a camera that doesn't have a light meter is to learn how to do the settings yourself. Right. So then again, which happens around the masters magically, there's like these 3 Filipinos appear out of nowhere, and a father and his 2 sons. The sons are like in their late 20s, similar age that I was at the time. And the father was like in his 60s or something. And he was a filmmaker, and his sons were photographers, and they invited me to go out into the mountains with them to, you know, to go on a trek. So I took this camera with me, and on this trek, they taught me everything I needed to know about how to do the shutter speed and the aperture thing when I don't have the light meter to tell me what the figures are. Okay, so I learned a little bit with them, and then when I went out on this very particular journey to an area of northern Nepal, in fact, Rinpoche sent me on this journey, I took my camera and I took more than 1,000 photographs on that trip. And then when I came back to Kathmandu and had all these photographs piled up, it was like a click and wind camera, so all physically printed out. I was like, what the heck do I do with these? It's like a shame to just shove them in a drawer or to leave them, you know, I need to do something. So I had like spread them all over my room, and then certain photos started jumping out at me, and I made my first photo collage art piece. And then I thought I need to do an exhibition with this photo collage art piece, but only one piece is not enough. So I made another with those photos. Then I gathered all these people together, made an exhibition. It was a lovely occasion. Again, the snowball is now rolling. Yeah, I'm picking up more snow. Is really where I
Yes,
wanted to.
absolutely.
So there was a leaping orbit. We've got the first
Another
major.
leaping orbit. And for those who don't know who you are, and I'm going to interject this right now, Susan is a phenomenal artist. She is a phenomenal filmmaker, a phenomenal writer, and all of her works come together to this bigger precipice and to be witness to part of your journey, because we haven't known each other a really long time, but when I started engaging in your work, I couldn't put it down, and I listened to all of your films, and I looked at all of your artwork that I could get my hands on, and it's just phenomenal because it transcends the standard. It's not art for the sake of just doing art, but it's art for the sake of understanding dimensionality. It's art for the sake of understanding source. It's art for the sake of understanding realms or
And it's
leaping orbits.
and it's my life path.
There you go. So
It's
I just needed to interject that.
Thank you so much for those kind words, and I really appreciate that. And you know, my interruption of mentioning my life path, because I don't decide what I do and where I go and how I do it.
Right.
My my will is not like, oh, now I want this and therefore I'm gonna achieve this and then I'm gonna get this because I desire it or I want it. I flow with what comes up, and I move with that and allow it to express itself.
Yes.
And the sort of genre of spiritual discourse in a way that comes up around it, and then that's what I put into the film or into the picture. The picture comes first, and then I embed all those symbols into the timeline of the film. But then there's normally a first edition, a second edition, and then a third edition, because things are also evolving as I'm working on it. And these leaps of orbit, so sort of to sum it up, I would say, you know, I've told you about two major leaps of orbit that sort of got me moving, and there've been other leaps of orbit in between. One actually, something that I'd like to recount, I would call this a sub-leap of orbit, because it was actually inside the period with the lamas in Nepal.
Okay.
Is when I had to make a decision, but when I was practicing a certain sadhana. It's sadhana is a practice that is, you go through A to Z. So you'll start by reciting something, and then you'll meditate on something, and then you'll visualize something, and then you'll whatever. There's a process, and there are longer sadhanas and shorter sadhanas.
Yes.
And I was practicing. I've been taught this one sadhana by Rinpoche, my teacher, and of course I have a life that's going on outside as well. I need to earn money, so I'm also doing some editing work with various organizations. I'd been the copy editor on the Himalayan Times, the largest English language newspaper in Kathmandu. I've made a lot of connections through that because I've been invited to all these functions. Now people were asking me, please, like, you know, could you edit this document with or can you recite this thing with your British English and blah, blah, blah. So I was getting little bits of work here and there. And then suddenly came this contract to make these 5 movies. I wasn't in the movie making business at the time. to make these 5 movies with a Danish NGO about some disabled kids in the high up in the like northern stretches of Nepal, so different regions of northern Nepal. And it was like, I don't know, I was going to get like $5,000 or something for this, which was a massive amount of money for me to live in Nepal and to keep on living for a long time and just doing what I'm doing. It was plenty enough to stay there. And so I was like, wow, great, fantastic. And in fact, one day during this time, I went to meet Rinpoche and, you know, just, oh, hello, how are you kind of thing. And he looks at me, goes, have you done the retreat for this particular sadhana that I'm practicing? And I'm like, oh, here we go. Because have you done the retreat for means do the retreat for.
Yeah.
He's never going to tell me do it. It's not going to be like, you have to do this now. It's like, have you done the... And this retreat takes more than 3 months to complete. And I'm going to have to sit in my room for 3 months and do this. And I knew it was coming, kind of. But like, I'm about to sign a $5,000 contract, which will keep me going for years in Nepal. And now Rinpoche is saying, do the retreat. I'm like, big decision to make. Big decision to make. So I had been studying because Rinpoche had sent me to this other Lama who had taught me a specific practice of yogas that goes along with this sadhana.
Okay.
And, you know, I had just recently been studying these yogas with him. And so I decided to go to him and to ask him what I should do. Like, I'm in a complete dichotomy here. I want this and I want that. I mean, I want to do the films. It's also an interesting project. And I want the money. And I want to do the retreat. But, you know, you can't have your cake and eat it. It's like, what do I do?
Right.
So I went to this Lama and I asked him, what should I do? What do you think? And I told him the outline. And he said, well, if you're interested in this life alone, then do the film project. But if you're interested in all lives to come, then do the sadhana, do the retreat. So what do I do? Of course, what am I going to do?
Do the retreat.
So I wrote to the NGO, sorry, can't do it. Something's come up, blah, blah, blah. And I have enough money in my bank account to get me through the 3 months, to the end of the 3 months. Remember, I have 2 children with me. I'm also supporting school and food. I have somebody helping me with the kids. So that's kind of taken care. They're kind of taken care of in their, you know, day-to-day needs in that sense. But I still have to provide for my family. Nobody's like just, you know. So now I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm going to just do this retreat and then I'll figure out the money afterwards. So in the retreat, you're not meant to be in contact with anybody, but I wasn't going to cut contact with my mother because if I didn't contact her for months, she'd be like, are you okay? Yeah. And I equally wasn't going to tell her that I'm locking myself in my room for 3 months and doing this so-called meditation sadhana thing that my guru has told me to do, because she'd be like, have you gone mad? You know, you need to be out there earning money and being a good mother and da-da-da-da-da, all the rest of it, you know, filling all the criteria.
Yes.
So I decided I'll continue to call my mother once a week, but everybody else, just forget them. So on the first week during my retreat, I called my mother. And she was unusually excited. She was like, oh, hello, darling, how are you? And da-da-da-da-da, all the rest of it. And I've made a decision. I'm like, okay. She said, well, you know, I got that little bit of money through from her stepfather had left her a little inheritance. I got a little bit of money through from my stepfather. And you know what? I'm going to send you £200 a month just to help you with all your expenses and everything else. Now, £200 a month was exactly, not more, not less, the amount of money that my expenses were, like my apartment, the school fees, the woman to help me with the kids, the rent, the food, everything. I mean, it was super cheap in Nepal in those days. £200 I could survive on. For the next 5 years, my mother sent me £200 a month.
Wow.
That,
Wow.
so that's the lesson. That's the lesson. I didn't run after the money. I did what I felt was right, and the money came to me.
Thank you.
I don't know, I can't do it in my head what 2,000 is times however long, 5 years, but it was probably more than $5,000 in the end. But it was, do you understand, the money that I
Yes, I
need?
do. Because what happens, I always like to call it this way, when we do what we're called to do, then money ends up being the byproduct of what we're supposed to do anyway. It comes to you one way or another. But
First, you
because
have to make the decision.
exactly, exactly. And then, some people would call it poverty consciousness, in the respect that I have to do this. I can't, I have my kids, I have this, I have that. How is that? It's not fast enough. It's not enough. I need more than enough. I need. And we just have to sit still, and we just have to allow. And then gratitude when it comes, because a lot of times the things that we ask for come and we don't even acknowledge it. We don't acknowledge it because we're already in reactionary mode beyond the moment that we've asked. And so I truly love that. I love that.
That was such a big lesson to me. I cannot tell you. It was such a big lesson. I had made this major move. I had just trusted it through, and boom.
Boom.
And I have to add that since that moment, and this was now more than 20 years ago, I have never had to ever think where money is coming from again. Ever. Never.
Beautiful.
Never. So this was such a huge lesson for me.
Yes. And I think we're going to end it on this note, because that is such a profound lesson that I want our audience to embrace. And what I would love to do is to ask you to come back, so that then we can focus on your artwork and some of the things that you're doing, and share that aspect.
Let me add another tidbit into the story, because the Lama who told me, or offered me the advice, if you're only thinking about this life, then do the film project. If you're thinking about all lives to come, do the retreat, is now my husband.
Oh, how beautiful. Oh my God, how beautiful.
So we hold the story there.
Okay. Oh my goodness. That was such a wonderful, wonderful share. Thank you so much for your insight, your wisdom, and sharing your heart. We are going to have you back. Thank you, thank you, thank you. What a beautiful story. Please tell people how they can get in contact to see your work and see what you do.
My website is pyramidkey.com, pyramidkey.com. And actually all my work is, I say all, but the majority of things that I've worked on is all up there in that.
Well, thank you so, so much. This has been another episode of The Infinite Way, and thank you, Susan, for all that you bring. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.